Hi, I'm John Stevens,
This is Matt Russell.
and this is Pod Have Mercy.
This is Pod Have Mercy.
Welcome. Matt Russell is with me. We're also joined with the Reverend Rachel Sciretti.
Hi,
Yes. And this is your first podcast ever.
my very first podcast ever.
Are you excited?
I am excited and nervous.
No, don't be nervous.
I've listened to you guys.
We're professionals. You're in the hands of professionals.
We'll take good care of you. Just follow our lead. That's all you have to do. Well, it's Rachel is one of our pastors on staff and works with parenting ministry and also works with our senior adults. Mm-hmm. And so as we talk about the things that have been going on in our lives, usually you and I catch up and say, hey, what you been doing this past week?
Right. It feels like kind of spiritual triage in a lot of ways. I think folks are still kind of every day, it feels, as you and I've talked about, there's new information and conflicting information, and Houston just kind of is preparing to go under sheltering in.
2 weeks, stay at home.
Yeah. And I think that we got off a Zoom call with some other pastors in our on our staff and talked about kind of mental, spiritual health, and there's just raises a lot of anxiety for folks.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what I think is important for us to talk about today. So, for those who follow or listen and they're not in Houston, we are been issued an order now, shelter in place, stay at home. They call it different things. The mayor has been very, very important to the mayor to not say it's shelter in place.
No, we're just staying at home.
Stay at home order. Can't go out, can't do anything. But we are allowed at the church. We will be allowed to come in video for worship.
That's right.
And we're also allowed to engage in pastoral care on a one-on-one basis in the need of an emergency.
That's right.
And so that's important for folks to know,
And the food pantry as well.
And our the serving ministry is allowed. That's essential. Only essential duties or essential work is allowed. Mm-hmm. And of course, this morning we had our first thing. You talk about that. You were there early this morning, weren't you?
Well, our serving team is just, they know their stuff. And so there's a food pantry at our Fairhaven site that Blessings and Backpacks is also has a connection to the Houston Food Bank, and so they've dropped off both kind of resources for kids and food yesterday, and then again we received 10 or 12 pallets last night to distribute for tomorrow.
Yeah,
and
so that was over at our Gessner Road campus with Fairhaven, and then this afternoon I'm going to Spring Branch Family Development Center. We're going to be handing out there, and then tomorrow as well, right?
That's right, tomorrow at 10 o'clock at Fairhaven.
At Fairhaven as well. So there's a lot of need, and we're going to find this now with this shelter in place or stay at home for 2 weeks. Schools are out. A lot of these kids that we're dealing with on the north side of our school district, Spring Branch Independent School District, we're on the west side of Houston. And not only in our school district, but HISD, you're aware, what is it? The numbers are 30% of children.
Yeah, 1/3 of all kids in HISD are living in food scarce environments.
Yeah, and so particularly with us in Spring Branch, on the north side of our school district, we have a similar situation. Yeah. So a lot of the times these kids would be, the only meal they'd get would be breakfast or lunch provided by school. And so we find in the summer, spring breaks, Christmas break are bad. So now we're looking at an extended at least 2 week, maybe longer.
Yeah.
So it's important that I'm glad to be a part of a church that has a passion for making sure that it's not just that we're not just taking care of our members, which we're going to talk about, just how you take care of yourself, how you take care of your family as you're on lockdown.
Yeah.
A guy called me yesterday and I said, how are you holding up? He goes, I've never spent so much time with my family in a short amount of time. He's like, I've got to get out of the house. I'm like, dude, well, you better get out quick because tomorrow you're just stay at home. So I don't know what you're going to do. But well, one of the things I think it's important for us to talk about, and the reason we got Rachel in here today too, is to talk about, we've never faced anything like this from a situation, even with Harvey, where we were shut down and people were sheltered in place. You could still get out and about. Even if you got out of your house, you could still move around community. You weren't limited from social, there's no social distancing. You weren't limited with human connection. And so you could get out. It wasn't that long before school started back up. And you also had a huge volunteer base. So even if someone was alone, they could go visit. They could go take them meals or take them the food or visit them and sit with them. This is very different because we're all asked to hole up. And even here in our studio today, starting tonight at midnight is stay-at-home order. But we're spread out a little bit different than we normally are to try to keep some social distancing between us. And I think about the ways that this impacts and affects us. This article that Jeff got us, I thought was fascinating, but it talks about the ways that this researcher, Nicholas Christakis, from a physician at Yale University, talks about how this thing that's now causing all of us to be disconnected, seeing our friends, the things that make us who we are as human creatures, that gather us in connection, where we get together with groups, we're able to touch one another, we're able to hug one another and be with one another and visit with one another. Just the thing you think about going out and having a beer with somebody or a meal with someone or catching up on a play date. Think about with all the kids. I know we'll want to talk about that in a little bit too, but they interviewed him and he talks about the mental and the physical health of this decreased social, and there's a lot of research that's been done about social isolation. Yeah. And one of the first things they talk about is that it actually increases other health risks.
Yes.
Like depression, dementia, heart disease, because when we are disconnected from one another, one of the things that social contact does is it buffets the negative effects of stress in your life.
Yes, that's right.
So we have a lot of vulnerable people that were already vulnerable, and we think, social isolation, it's easy for some of us to say, well, I got a 2-week vacation, that's great.
Netflix
but that is
all
not,
the way. No.
There's a lot of people that this will impact in very negative ways.
Yeah. We've already seen a spike in kind of just psychotropic drugs, for anxiety, depression that's gone through the roof. People are calling their GP saying, I can't handle this, right? And so I think it uncovers this kind of generalized sense of fear that we have, that we live with, and we don't know when this is going to end. We don't even know what this is. It kind of taps into these deep fears, and then you add isolation on part of that. We are tribal creatures. I mean, this is the first problem in our story in the Bible. Wasn't that sin had to be overcome. It was isolation. It was that this human creature was alone. Yeah. Right? And that's the first thing God says. It ain't good.
No, it's not good. It's not good to be alone. No. And you shouldn't be alone.
Or just with your children. It's not good.
And even people like my mother, right? My mother lives at home. She has since my stepfather passed away in 2014. She lives alone. She likes to live alone. She likes kind of to be left alone, right? But all of a sudden now that she has to be alone, mentally, it's a completely different situation for her. Yes. And so now she's actually dealing with depression that, you're doing the same thing you did 2 weeks ago, but now it's very different now for you in your life.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's a deep sense that there's mental health in the ability to have options. And if your options begin to be decreased and you don't have those options, then you feel not only isolated, but you feel like you don't have the options to get out of where you're at. I think that's why, part of the way that torture happens in wartime is that we isolate the person from, and so that's why even in our prisons today, solitary isolation, right, is really, you have all of these human rights groups that are saying this should not happen. Yeah. You should not take a human person and put them alone, and so I think that one of the unintended things out of this is we're going to begin to see that communities like Chapelwood are increasingly going to become more important.
I think so.
Not only in the midst of this, but after this, I hope.
Yeah, the other thing they talk about is that there are certain demographics that are more susceptible. Yeah. Social isolation and loneliness, particularly older adults. Someone sent me an email this week saying that they really wanted us to make sure and find time to talk about, not just on the podcast, but even on Sunday mornings or as we send information out, about people who who are very isolated, widows or widowers or people who are single, and it's not the same just to pick up the phone and talk on the phone as it would be. And there's a lot of struggle on our part. I think mental health is going to be a huge issue. One of the things that we're trying to set up now, I think, is opportunities for people to call and connect for 30 minutes with someone, just to have a mental health checkup.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's very important.
Yeah.
It's one thing to call and say, hey, how are you doing? What did you do today? It's another thing to talk about, hey, how are you doing in your soul? How's your...
Yeah. We also talked about the necessity of, in those kinds of groups that we'll be setting up, of also just having connection points where I don't know if right now is a time to go really deep into our fear, because I think sometimes then you get off the phone and you feel lost because then you're alone, right. But is there in these groups that we're setting up ways of just keeping it not just light, but how do we connect, and how do we then, I know we got one of our, the Oikon group talked about today, playing card games online with each other.
Yeah. Technology compensates for social distancing and differences, but it also, there's some downsides to it.
Yeah.
It talks about, you've got texting, you've got email, you've got Skype and FaceTime and Zoom. These are great things that help us stay in touch. So really, if you think about it, there's a lot of blessing that we live in an age where we're able to have the technology with us that we have. But he says, even though we have that, these modes of communication don't entirely replace face-to-face interactions. When we interact with other people, a lot of meaning that's conveyed, he says, between two people is actually not conveyed in the actual words, but in the nonverbal behavior. And so all those subtleties of body language and facial expression and gestures, they get lost in electronic media. Yeah. It's not as good as face-to-face interaction. It's better than nothing, but it's still really limited. And so when people are engaged, I know I put something on Facebook, say, how are you engaging? And a lot of folks sitting back saying, I'm having story time with my grandkids every night on FaceTime. That's and they say it's great. Yeah. But that's not the same as having them sit in your lap.
No, that's right.
And reading them a book.
No, we talked about before we went live that idea that there's, because we are people of the incarnation, right? We believe that God put flesh and blood on, that there's no substitute for flesh. That our idea as we head into Easter of the bodily resurrection, that this body got up. So we're people of the body. The body means something to us. Flesh means something to us. And so I think in the meantime, these kinds of technological advances that we have are helpful, but they're not enough. At the end of the day, it's a hand that I need to hold.
I hope and pray that we put technology in its right bucket in this season. I think it's become so much a centerpiece of our lives that it takes away from real human connection. And I wonder if going through something like this will help us to, instead of allowing technology to master us, that we master technology to use it for the purposes that help us to succeed where we need to succeed, but not to replace real human interaction.
Yeah.
And the last thing he points out here, which is really important for us as we think about gathering for worship, is that how does it impact you? What do we miss as a human society when we're not able to go to a concert, when we're not able to go to the Astros game, when we're not able to go to church and worship together? And 100 years ago, Emile Durkheim, used a phrase, French sociologist, uses the phrase collective effervescence to describe the shared emotional excitement that people experience during religious ceremonies. Yeah. And I would say the same thing is true. Let's take the Rockets, James Harden, right?
Yeah.
And if you've been to a Rockets game or a professional basketball game and your team is good, there is nothing that's more energetic and alive
you're
at
hugging
the
people
opening
you don't know.
of this thing. So went to a playoff game a couple of years ago, and you're literally hugging people,
folks you never met,
high-fiving them, spitting all over people, it's just crazy. There's something that is built there around your sports team. So there's, what they say is that there's cohesiveness that is built that pulls us together. And so whether it's an NBA game or whether it's an Astros game or whether it's a concert or maybe it's church, there's something that fills us where we are all together are lifted in an emotional moment at the one time around a shared experience that binds us together. It reinforces core ideas, core beliefs. When everyone elevates at that same time, crescendo, there's something that it's exponential. So it's not just, hey, I felt that. We all felt that.
Yeah.
And it's like 100 times more than if we had been there by ourselves.
That's right.
And we're missing that.
Yeah.
The last thing I think is from a spiritual perspective is, last week, I preached on Jesus feeding the 5,000. And there's so much there about scarcity and about Jesus being present where there's need that speaks to where we are. And this week, the text is from John 6, where Jesus, they leave, he goes up on the mountain to pray after he feeds the 5,000, and he misses the boat. So they take off to the other side, to Capernaum, I believe, and the storm rises up, and Jesus walks out on the water to meet them out there. Yeah. And the scripture says, in that beginning of that passage, that when evening came, the disciples went down to the sea. They got into the boat. They started across the sea to Capernaum. And I love this sentence. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. And there's something about the darkness in these days that we find ourselves now, in this difficulty, these different ways of dealing with this virus, with social distancing, with all these things that are happening in our lives. I've heard it described by a lot of people as a sense of dealing in darkness. We're traveling in darkness. We don't have a template for this. We don't have a playbook for this.
No.
We don't know what tomorrow holds. We don't know if they're going to turn the economy back on in a week or if it's going to not be turned on for 8 weeks. I mean, we don't know the answer to these questions. And so we don't even know what we're fighting against. You can't see coronavirus. And so when you're in the darkness, I love the idea of our spiritual forefathers and foremothers who used darkness as the spiritual setting by which we're invited to trust not only ourselves, but to trust God.
Yes.
And to learn that we don't know everything. We can't see everything. And that to learn to trust in God and God's sustaining provision for us. And so in the Christian spiritual tradition, darkness is not necessarily bad or evil. It's not something to be avoided. Darkness rather is simply when things are obscured and we're driven now to trust God with our lives.
That's right. That's right. It's part of the human reality, darkness. Right. I love that as I've kind of been preparing for this Sunday and the service, I've looked at that text and think about the water too. You know, that the water in the Old Testament was always about chaos, was always about things that come out of the deep. You know, with always about in Genesis, it was the Spirit of God that was brooding over. Yeah. You know, the water, and it's out of that primordial stuff that and in psychology, Jung always talks about the shadow side, always uses the image of water as the things in the unconscious that we aren't aware of that might overwhelm us. And so I think here's Jesus walking on that, is saying, I'm your God. You know, that I'm present in the midst of the darkness and the chaos. And there's something about that as you preach this weekend, I'm just going to hang on to that. Yeah. So it better not suck, John. I want you to know my mental and spiritual life
That's why I'm working on it. That's why I'm working on it so hard to get ready. You know,
I'm kidding because, and I want to say, like last week was really wonderful for me and my family as well, just listening to you preach and just being together, worshiping, you know, alone, but together. Yeah. I was like, okay, you know, you said something early on in your sermon, I'm keeping you in my mind. And as you said that, it helped me to think, oh, wait, there's folks all over the city in our community. I'm keeping them in my mind.
There have been a lot of things online. You sent me one where preachers are preaching in front of their churches and they have pictures of the families all in the pews.
Yeah.
And so they're visualizing them there. And it is different. I mean, it's you did it the week before to preach to an empty room.
Yeah.
And to preach to a camera, but for me, it's like I'm looking through that camera and seeing all those people that are normally seated there.
Yes.
I think it's going to change the way we think about engaging in online ministry. And we've always treated that as just sort of an observational crowd that's not really connected. And now it's the crowd. Yeah. It is the body of Christ that we're connecting to. Yeah. Well, Rachel, you have, all right, so you have like little kiddos.
I have a 4-year-old, soon to be 5. I have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old.
Wow. So what is this past week? Or so last week was spring break anyway.
Last week was spring break, and we chose to treat it as such in our family.
You're in trouble now going forward.
So now it's, day 2 of homeschooling, home working. Well, yesterday, so how my day began was this message to parents went out over the interwebs.
And you were the voice of like, here's how you do it.
Yes.
Well, not so much here's how you do it, but you can do it. Be you, and you can do this. And then hours later, I am on a conference call, and Nathaniel just screams and cries, and the child has swallowed a Lego.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a
Building
small.
for his future.
It was a small Lego, just the round, 1 dot Lego. But he said it was spiky.
Yeah.
So I think it was a specialized piece. Anyway, it went down, and
this too shall pass.
This too shall pass. It hasn't yet.
Nobody will.
But yes, it will.
Enough applesauce.
Good thing he likes applesauce. So anyway, it was really funny that here
you can make this a game.
Pastor, and
you can make this a game. Like every day.
Yes.
Oh yeah, he
hide and seek for the Lego.
I'm not even going to go into it.
All right, anyway, go on.
Yeah. No,
I
don't want to go into the gory details.
No, I know. I'm sorry. We cover all the bases here. Mm-hmm. So you've also got teenagers.
Yes. And they're doing really well. Getting up in the morning, getting after their schoolwork, and but my 14-year-old said she just seemed kind of today, and I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "I just am ready to be at school." So I was thinking, "Oh, baby, we got a lot of days of this." But they're really great kids, and everyone is doing the best they can.
Yeah. So we've got, in addition to talking about older folks who are isolated and need to think about their well-being and their health, we also have households that are full of people.
Yeah.
And a lot of them that are full of little ones. I've got 2 young adults, 22 and 19. And one of the things I deal with, I don't know if your kids, it's like they want to go be with their friends all the time. This is a part of their identity. And to say, no, you can't go in a carload to Starbucks it seems innocuous to them. But I wonder, as we're thinking about speaking a word of encouragement to parents with kids, I mean, this is a whole new world for even them.
I mean, there's a lot of boundary setting, and I think that it kind of varies according to the age of your kids. But with preschoolers, I mean, and elementary children, I mean, it's been very, very clear. And my approach is I tackle things as they come. I mean, we've explained things, but it's more of this unfolding. And then as things arise, we'll kind of deal with it, because we don't have sometimes all the information to make a hard and fast decision about anything in any given moment, except when it's presented to us. So, with my preschooler, it's, answering questions factually, correcting misinformation, and just assuring him that he is safe. Yeah. And that is the most important thing. And we will take care of you. But we can do something about this. We can be germ busters. We can wash our hands. We can, stay at home and not spread germs. And, we keep them on a routine rather than a schedule. I think the routine feels better to us. It's this comes next. One thing after
so
another,
not so
rather
much
than
time
the time
sensitive. It's just
and that's
things
works
in
for
order.
our household.
Okay.
Is just the order.
I've seen
of
there's been the
things.
COVID time chart for. Have you seen those? The color coded charts, like from this is the regimented.
Right, and that can work for some families. That would completely stress our family out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, if it works for you, great. Isn't so great for us. So it's just establishing a routine.
So for the littlest ones, you're saying just be honest. I think,
and it's okay to say I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm not really sure about that, but we can find out. We can get on the computer and Google to try to find out the answers to questions. But it's also like redefining what compassion is. And we talked about this in the center this past Sunday. But we're used to compassion thing, but it starts in our hearts and then it comes out through us, through our bodies. And so it's to touch somebody, it's to give to somebody, but we can't do that right now.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of the compassionate act is to withdraw physically. The compassionate act is to not go and buy out everything at the grocery store so that others can't have it and hoard it. I mean, so it's figuring out, it's looking at compassion a little bit differently. And so explaining that to a 4-year-old is that we're being together because they understand about colds. When they're in preschool, they're giving each other germs all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So they talk about it. And Nathaniel's teacher did a really good job of explaining, because I would hear him washing his hands and he would say, the coronavirus isn't affecting children, but we still have to wash our hands. No children are getting sick. And he says it with such confidence. It made me feel good that, okay, there's a lot we don't know about this thing yet, but he's feeling a sense of safety. Yeah. So that's probably, that's really good. Probably the most important thing. Yeah. With elementary schoolers and middle schoolers, and, every kid has a different personality and parents know their children best. But to be able to say to your kid, it's not your job to worry. You don't have to worry about this. Some kids absorb like a sponge, so much. And to be able to release them and help them to release themselves from the worry, to say it's not your job. And then Mr. Rogers so famously said, in times of crisis, look for the helpers.
Yeah.
Look for the good news. Look for the gospel, right?
Yeah. And
so if we can help our kids to look for that, it's a huge teaching moment to from looking at the glass half empty to the glass half full. And so looking for the good news, looking for the helpers.
That's something we all could do.
Yes.
I saw something on social media, and it was a picture of nurses and doctors from Italy after all day, and they still had the marks on their faces from the masks they wore, the goggles they wore, and it was just a powerful thing to think about. Here are the people that are helping us. So that's a good insight.
Yeah. But then when our kids get to be middle schoolers and high schoolers and young adults, I think the question switches to how can I as a parent support you? What do you need from me? Because they are getting no at every turn. No, you can't go out. No, you can't go over to your friend's house. No. And so if we can turn that to, this is what we're dealing with. Now it's handed down from, powers greater than our family. How can I support you through this so that you can get through this? So can I help you manage information? Can I send you articles? Because they're on their phones, right? Can I send you articles to help you understand this? Can I encourage you to get to bed at a decent hour instead of staying up till 3 and waking up at 11? How would you like me to do that? How can I, as far as like mealtime, it'd be eating nutritiously, or you want to run together? Would that be helpful? But approaching it from giving them the power to say what they need and to inviting them to get in touch with that themselves. That would be my first, and that is actually how we're handling it with our daughters. That's our first.
Well, and that's one of the duties of being a parent is you're
Yeah.
You're trying to prepare them for adulthood. And so there's a huge in-between period where they think they already are adults and you know they're not.
Right.
And so you have to coach them up. I always thought of it as more like
Really
coaching them up, right?
That's really true.
There was an email that went out earlier today, Jim Harrington and Trisha Taylor. And they sent this video out about anxiety and dealing with anxiety. And there were 3 things real quick that they said that I thought were hilarious. They said, anxiety makes us stupid. Not that you are stupid, but anxiety makes us stupid because your feelings go up and your thinking goes down.
Yeah.
And we have difficulty then accessing the grounding beliefs of our life.
Yes.
So we're not
That's right.
rational anymore. And so you have to think about that and sort of, we're going to be anxious in this time. I think that's kind of funny that Paul says don't be anxious. It's kind of impossible. Also, he says that anxiety focuses on things that are out there instead of us focusing things that are inside of us. And always the enemy is out there and the threat is out there, and we don't do enough self-work and self-care. I found this to be the case in talking to people, that they want to be doing things, they want to be helping, they want to be going, they want to start a soap factory or a Purell factory or something. These are all great things, by the way. But it's like our compulsion to do something is focusing on something that doesn't allow us to do the self-work to deal with the stuff inside of us.
Yeah. Darwin said that humans are the only species that when they are lost increase their speed. Right? And so there's a sense in which...
so good.
Isn't that great? There's a sense in which collectively...
He's really smart, by the way.
I just remember stuff, obscure things. There's a sense in which that our society feels lost, and the first reaction is let's all speed up and do nothing together really quickly and really inefficiently, where I think that what we learn in Christian meditation is to slow our breathing down, to get in the present moment, because anxiety creates a story, an unreal, othered story. And when I think about what I'm anxious about, is there going to be enough? Is there going to be enough food? Is our folks going to be okay? Is all these things. When I think about today, in this present moment, our church has set up food banks. I don't know of hungry people that don't have access to food right now, right? So the present reality that we're in, and like you had said, we need to think pragmatically and practically, and we're going to plan that. But then come back into this present moment and know that God is meeting our needs in real time, and if things change, we'll figure out how to change with those times.
Yeah, and part of I shared this last week on a video that went out to Chapelwood, is that I find in all the tactical preparation, you got to get the groceries for 2 weeks, and you got to handle this, and you got to organize the team, and you got to check on the food distribution, and that you're doing all these logistical items, you're engaged in all this activity, and you can lose a conscious sense of the presence of Christ in the moment.
Yeah.
The next thing you know, you've gone through 3 days and you haven't really noticed God present anywhere. But God's present in all of this, everywhere. And I think a really good activity for us all to engage in is to ask ourselves regularly as we stop, where is Christ in this moment right here? And how am I contributing to the work of Christ in this moment right here?
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, I think, at home with kids calling to you from all corners of the house, and you're trying to meet their physical needs with getting a meal out, and your phone is ding-a-linging from, all the different things. I can get so overwhelmed, and then I get really snippy, and then I might, just totally lose it. But in my better moments, when I just feel the wave, and for me, it's a wave, if I can ground myself, if I can feel my feet on the floor, okay? I mean very physically feel them touching the floor, and then breathe, and then just let the oxygen come and just fill me. I can come back to myself. I can come back to center. And that is a very simple but deeply spiritual act for me. And it might take a little bit, and I mean, 2 seconds later, I might, the wave might be coming again, but it's coming back to that. And for people that are giving care to others and trying to meet their needs, and I think that might be helpful. It is for me, at least, because spirit is connected to breath. Mm-hmm. I mean, we know this just from our language study, our word study in Scripture, and so just that deep breathing.
Some people may not know that you and your husband, Michael Sciretti, is also on staff at Chapelwood and is a pastor at the Center for Christian Spirituality, our contemplative community.
Yeah.
And I think on the Stay Connected page, we're going to have a lot of links there. It's interesting to me on our call this morning, there's opportunities for centering prayer on Monday and Wednesday mornings that are led. There's a contemplative worship service that if people need to dig deeper and really kind of sit in the presence, that worship service is there as well, that gives people the opportunity. Well, what I thought I'd end with and see what you had to add is I posted on Facebook this week just asking people, hey, what are you doing? What are you learning? What are you experiencing or planning in these practices in quarantine and social distancing? And just was a word of hope for me to hear from all these people. Lara said, I'm taking opportunity to teach children some life skills and making them take on more responsibility around the house.
I wonder if Laura could come to my house.
Okay. Cindy said, I am enjoying reading the commentary and the articles in my study Bible. I normally look Scripture up and I don't take the time to soak it all in, which I thought was fascinating. Paula said, I'm watching online to find as much as I can. She's not doing too well with the social distancing. Paula, we love you. It's going to be okay. We'll make it through this. I love this picture.
Yeah.
One of my highlights, my youngest son, Nico, Tricia said, initiated creative writing time in the backyard patio. And we write our favorite moments and share them as a family.
Fantastic.
One of our guys on staff, Gabe, and his family pulled out the paints and the paint sets, and they're all gathering around and engaged in creative arts and painting. Amy said, still trying to keep it light, keep the screen time to a minimum. Going to do some homeschooling, which hasn't happened since a long time ago. Nancy said, we're taking things more slowly, spending time in the kitchen, talking more openly, relationship issues, getting outdoors. John, who's a great guy, took to heart your comment this morning to call your older friends. Have already made a calling list and roster of some old high school classmates. Great. Courtney said, daily exercise as a family exercise.
Wow.
We haven't done that yet. Quiet time, card games, puzzles, family movie every night. We have watched all 8 Harry Potter movies the last 8 nights.
Woo.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great.
So we have nothing to do now for the next 2 weeks. Dion said, calling a long list of friends and acquaintances to check in, catching up on videos and work. And, you just go on this, somebody's going to be calling their students, rolling out distance learning. Reading that stack of books, Tammy said, I've amassed over the past few years.
Yeah.
That's good.
And I love Joe, as a friend of mine from Georgia. He said, I'm learning that I need to extend a lot of grace to everybody, that I need to remember that no one person, group, company that I'm dealing with has ever dealt with a situation like this.
Yeah.
So just great stuff that people are already learning and growing and connecting with on to share this.
It's good. There's gifts in this.
There are gifts.
There's gifts in this.
Yes.
I think the key is for all of us, finding where Christ is present in this and teaching our children to look for Christ present as well. But I think it all starts with us, parents, adults, older adults, all of us. God is calling us to do a work in our soul.
Yes.
There's some tilling, some work that's very uncomfortable for us.
Yes.
This change. But as Roar says, the 2 ways that you really grow in life, one is through the experience of great love, and the other is through the experience of great pain or crisis in life. Yeah. And hopefully, we're all experiencing some great love in the midst of great pain and crisis.
Yeah. Amen.
Well, I'm John Stevens.
I'm Matt Russell.
And this... Oh!
Don't leave me out.
Oh, let's do it! Hey, we had a rhythm. All right. So
Sorry, I messed up the rhythm.
No, take two. All right, ready? I'm John Stevens.
And I'm Matt Russell.
And I'm Rachel Sciretti.
And this is Pod Have Mercy.